file is supposed to be like technically styled by HTML document, or is it just kind of like default that stuff?
I'll give you some example, and then it will make sense. The projector ready? Okay. All right, so let's do this example. And this is independent. It's not just PHP. It's any server-side language. Any server-side language. Okay. There is an interpreter who would read a PHP file, or ERB file, Ruby file, or Python file, or C# file, or whatever. It just reads it. Okay. Wherever there's a scripting language, it runs it, and then generates a response. Okay. That response is what the browser sees. It doesn't know all the PHP code or Ruby code or Python code that was run, behind the scenes. All that it cares about is what did this server respond back to me with. Okay? And if this response was a bunch of HTML, and I told the browser that I'm looking for an HTML file, it's going to take that and render that as an HTML. Okay. Let me do a few examples, and then I think this will make a lot more sense. So what I have over here is I have this demo. What is this? Oh, and laptop demo. Okay, let's stick this in the back a little bit. Yeah. Again, this is something I haven't done with the first boot camp, so you guys get the benefit. All right. So what is this? Why is it not doing mirror display? Displays. Yeah, so I know this is probably a little bit confusing, but I think this will make a lot more sense. Okay. So let me just do some very simple example. I have this index.php. If I do, let's say, what's up? There we go. And let's go to localhost. Okay, let's go through this example. This is what happened, right? The browser sent me a request. It's saying, hey, give me the localhost file. When it goes to localhost, it automatically looks for either index.html or index.php. Okay? So that's what the browser requested. What was the response that was generated by the server? View source, right there. That's what it echoed out. And that was the response of the server. Does it have any PHP code in there? No, it doesn't. Why not? Because the server already read the PHP file. This one over here, yeah. Okay, Echo Coding Dojo, right? That one, and then it already ran it. What if I do? So I can do a bunch of stuff, right? Like x is equal to 5. If x is equal to 5, Echo Coding Dojo. Else echo social. Okay, and we'll make it a little bit more interesting. We'll have it be a random number between 1 to 10, and if it is 5, we'll say it's a battle between social and Coding Dojo. Okay? Social wins, Coding Dojo wins, all that stuff. Okay? So, okay, let's make that a little bit bigger. What was the browser expecting? What was it expecting? It was expecting this response to be in the form of HTML. So the browser took my response and rendered it as an HTML. So if I said H2, battle between social and Coding Dojo. So we'll say friendly battle. I love social. Okay, that's what it outputs.
And what was your file extension saved as?
Index.php. If it gets saved as PHP file, the server would take that PHP file and it would run all the PHP code and it would generate a response. Okay, does that make sense?
A response in HTML?
No, just that.
Oh, okay.
That's the response. That's the response. Okay, your browser would take that and it would render that as an HTML. Make sense?
Yes.
why don't we do this? Let's have one thing. So let's say, remember in your HTML, you require some CSS file. What if I say, when you request the CSS file, it's going to have some PHP script. So I'm going to call it style.css.php. So that's exactly what I created over here. See that? So style.css.php over here. And I put some PHP codes over here, and this is just CSS stuff. But I embedded some PHP code in there. That question mark equal sign is basically a short way of writing this.
Echo?
Yeah, PHP echo. But that's kind of, you do that quite a bit, so you can do a shorthand.
So that'll work whether it's in the CSS file or HTML file.
It doesn't matter. Because the server would, just, again, read that, PHP file, replace all the PHP code with the output, and just, deliver that.
Well, it would have to have a PHP extension.
You would have to have a
It wouldn't
PHP
be able-
extension.
Yeah, you can just put it in .html and do the same syntax.
Yeah. That's how the server knows that, an extension that ends with .php, the PHP interpreter will go and it would run it. Later, I can change some of my settings so that I can say if it ends with this file extension, still run the PHP interpreter. But that is a little bit advanced, and you can basically forget what I said.
So if you don't use the shortcut question mark equal, where you actually use the question PHP, does it mean you can run PHP code even without a PHP extension? Or you still need the PHP extension?
You still need the PHP extension for the server to know that it needs to run the PHP interpreter.
Can you call it as a CSS file? Or
Yeah,
PHP?
so let's see, how would I call this file? So, before Social and Coding Dojo went in a friendly battle, I wrote some codes, just so that we can finish this. Okay, so look at this code, okay, and show me, and see if that makes sense. Look at this, okay? Style sheet, text CSS file. Which file? Style.css.php. Because again, all that the server cares about is this. When I go to localhost, style.css.php, this is the response. It make sense? So it would take that as a response, and if I do this, what would happen over here? On the style.css, I said body, colors, color. H1, color is that. Okay, so this is the response of style.css.php. What would happen if I reload the page?
Turn red.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Is that a little confusing? Okay. So just think of it this way. It's all it is this. Your browser requests a file. It says, give me a file. Your server would output what is in that file. When it ends with .php, your server knows to run the PHP interpreter, run all these PHP code, and replace that with the actual output, whatever you echo that. This is what people see. Whatever happens in the server, people don't see it. It happens within the server. Make sense? Okay. Even if it doesn't make sense, I'll give you another example, and maybe this will help a little bit. So could I create an image using PHP code? So again, when I'm looking for an image, so I have this image that we're going to do as an exercise. So and let me just open this really quick. Okay, so this is what we're going to do as an activity. If I asked you to create a game like this, how would you go and create it using for loops, if and else statements, and arrays? Okay, but let's take this one as an example. I have this games.php. When I go to localhost, and then let me actually put this on my demo. Okay, so this is really important that we understand, so I'm going to spend some time. So if I go to localhost, what was it, game.png file? No. Games.png. What did I name that? Games. Okay, it displays this. How does the browser know that this is an image file? It ended with PNG. But what is the actual response that the server generated when someone requested this .png file? It's basically this. If I drag and then drop this to a node editor, this is it. Okay, all that stuff, this bunch of stuff, that's the response. So, the server said, oh, you're looking for game.php. What did it echo out? It echoed out a bunch of this. And the browser took that and said, oh, this is a .png file. So these number means, certain pixel on this, screen, and I'm going to render this image. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So what if I wrote a program that said, when you look for an image, I'm going to output, a bunch of stuff. But I'm going to tell you what things I'm going to write a script to generate these response. And the browser is going to take that response and render that as an image. Does it make sense? So let's do that. So I already did it because I don't want to do all of these. Okay, so request and response. This is really important. Okay, so I have this code called image.php, and I just use some PHP functions to do some stuff. Okay, so let me show you what it does. So if I go to image.php,
that's really cool.
Okay, all it does is it generates like a response, like you've seen on the PNG file, but it would create a bunch of responses, and then the browser would render that as an image. Okay, I wish I can show you the source code, what the actual response is. Okay.
But can't you just turn it into can't you save that as a PNG file since it thinks it's an image? And then you could actually see
so
what
content type, maybe let's do like txt file. I don't know if that would work. Content type. Let's do, what are the different content types? Content types.
I know what to look up at least.
Let me just look it up. So I can save it. Text HTML. So let me see, let's test that as text.html. Okay? Yeah, it needs to be down, but it starts. Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I'll maybe think of a better example. But anyway, it just had a bunch of responses. It output a bunch of stuff, and on the content type, in the response, I can tell the browser whether that's an image or whether that's an HTML file or whatever. I told that it's an image or it's a .png file that stuff that I'm going to put as part of the response. Okay, and the browser, because I told it here, it knew that it was an image and it rendered it on the screen. So on the index.php, if I want to include that, I do image source and I do image.php. There it is. It's just an image, right? It didn't need to end with .im, .jpeg or .whatever. Does that make sense? So I can, if I want to insert PHP code in CSS, I can do that. If I want to insert PHP code in JavaScript, I can do that. If I want to use, I can basically use .php extension to create any file that I want. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, whatever. Even images, anything. Okay? Any questions on this?
Wait, so how does it know to render that code as a image if it's not PHP?
Because it's in the image tab. So your browser said, oh, whatever the image.php output, that's an image.
Read as an image.
Yeah.
Just a quick, just because like you just dove into the header, like
Mhm.
because the content type header, I was talking to some students yesterday about I was trying to explain like what the header is exactly and like how it displays, because they were like, well, how come when I echo something out and then I go header location, it won't let me go anywhere else? I was wondering if maybe you had like a quick explanation for that, or if maybe that's something for later.
Wait,
Yeah.
is the type of document that it is, like, 'cause I know that some documents, like some types of documents, they have a certain amount of like code underneath that sort of tells the browser, like, if it recognizes that pattern, then that's that type. Is that information like part of the header?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you do so this is going a little bit further. Like there are certain protocols for like how HTTP works. So when when a server generates a response, they develop these standards and said, hey, let's exchange some information about like what type of response we're gonna pass to you. So what you should do when you create a response, instead of just like outputting a bunch of stuff, why don't you tell us, you know, like general information about the nature of this response. And that's where the header comes in. So the response is actually broken down into a few different components. Okay? So you can say, you know, if the server was successfully able to deliver that response, why don't you also return us some codes indicating whether that went through? So, you know, they have some codes like, if, you know, tell us, you know, give us a code of 200 if you're able to successfully render that page. If that page no longer exists, but is redirected, but I should redirect to another page, give us a 301 code as part of the response, okay? And then there's like 404, which is now found, you know, 500, and all these different codes, okay? There's also content type. So you're giving us something, but tell us what the content type is. Is this a PDF file? You know, is this an image file? You know, is this a HTML file? Or is this a text file? Is this a JSON file? Let us know. And then also tell us the main content. Is there a way in Inspect Element that shows us exactly what is generated, what response is outputted?
I tried looking for it and I didn't find it. I was trying to figure out how to show him that yesterday.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure it out.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a way, but I'm not sure exactly how to find that information.
I know how to do that using Ajax, but this is. Do you guys know Alim or Achilles? Is there a way that we can show exactly how the breakdown is?
Yeah, it's either in the resource or in the resource or network file. Because network shows
Okay.
you what.
Could you maybe show me like how it is done? So maybe let's open up for the images and see exactly what the response is when the server requests image.php.
Let's see. Is this your computer?
Yep.
Network should give you some of the response. This shows you kind of graphically what kind of response you're getting.
There's that status,
Uh-huh.
right, that we talked about.
And there's some more detailed one too. So this one kind of shows you the time lag and everything. This is another one that if you go in, so you're using JavaScript, right? So usually JavaScript also give you that Ajax call, specifically what you use and what kind of JavaScript is run. What are you looking for exactly, Michael?
So I'm trying to see, when we load image.php, what is the actual response that the server generates?
Image.php.
Image.php. When the server loads image.php, because it should have the content type, it should have the actual content, I wanted to display.
Like, are you looking for like the hexadecimal?
Yeah, so this one, it
Yeah,
will
right
say.
there, right there, there it is.
Header.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you, Dillis. Okay, so when the server requested image.php, see the status code, that's what we talked about. 200 means, hey, I was able to, you know, that file exists. The URL, forget this for now. Okay, but it has a lot of different information. When I make a request, I'm also letting the server know, hey, this is my user agent. This is the person who's trying to access your site. I'm using Mozilla, you know, based framework, and you know, these are the cookies. You know, this is where they're coming from, and all that stuff. Okay, and then the server takes that and it outputs a response. And this is the header part of the response. But how can I see the content? View source. No, I don't think it delivers. It generates it. Oh, maybe the response has no response data though.
There are different tabs. One of them show the.
Yeah. But look at that. Content type, image PNG. That was part of the response. I told the browser, in the response, I said that the content I'm going to provide you is an image or image/PNG file. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go there. I was just how you were talking about it.
No,
It was
it's good.
relevant.
There are a lot of these things. I mean, I think maybe I could have explained it a little bit better.
Yeah, this.
But
This is actually super useful and helpful. What I might as well show you guys. Like 200 saying the server is okay, right? But imagine why you always see this 404 page is the 404 code is triggered. So there are different 2, 3, 4, 5 says different things about what the server is doing. So kind of if you want to connect the dots rather than just say you went on a tangent, is that when you encounter error, this is how the server knows.
Yeah.
And whenever you make an API call, this is how the server knows if you succeed or not. So this is actually super useful in the future.
yeah, very, very useful.
I wish you showed our class.
Yeah. All these
Me
things.
too.
Yeah, I know. The first lecture I did after, I think the jQuery one, JavaScript, they're like, yeah, we should have that. Yeah, this is one of those that we haven't covered in the first bootcamp. So it may be a little bit fuzzy, but this is just the key thing that you should remember. Key thing is, PHP, I can embed PHP code anywhere, anywhere. As long as the server knows that I have PHP code, and how does the server know? If you end the file with .php, the server will know you got some PHP code, and it's going to run the PHP code, and it's going to include that as part of the response. The browser is going to take that response, and looking at the content type will determine whether that's an image, text, HTML, or JavaScript, or JSON, or whatever. It is going to use that response as a template for HTML, image, or whatever. Does that make sense? Okay, so PHP is not used just to generate HTML. That was the key point. Okay, just remember that. PHP or Ruby or Python can be used to generate anything. Okay, because all at the end is just outputting bunch of data, bunch of text as part of the response. And it's up to the browser to take that information and render that as an image, or render that as an HTML, or render that as PDF file, or whatever. Okay?
So if you have PHP in your CSS file and you want to be able to provide input, do you sort of give it input through session also?
You can, whatever you want. Yeah.
What are the advantages of putting PHP and CSS together?
Yeah, so I was actually going to talk about that. Let me turn it around. When would you want to do that?
I would assume when you want the user to be able to maybe change the appearance of the web page, try this color in black or something.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so I can think of a few examples. So one is what Trey talked about. So let's say our learning platform, I allowed you guys to customize how it looked just for you. Okay, so how would I do that? I would store some of your settings in the database, and when I call the style.css file, I would do maybe style.css.php. I would read what you stored in the database, what's your personal preference setting, and then instead of color blue, which is the default, if you said I want color red, then in the color, I would replace that with PHP code. Okay, does that make sense? Let's say also that your CSS file has a lot of things that are being repeated. Maybe you only want to use 3 color schemes. Okay, but it's a pain to type all that color. Every single time you're pound 337799. It's a pain. So you say, okay, I'm just going to run some programming language behind the scene. So you declare 3 variables, and you just echo that variable out whenever you need to use that color. Later on, you will learn some other advanced CSS things that allows you to do it, but if you didn't know that, you could have done it using PHP, Ruby, or Python. Okay? So again, what I'm trying to tell you is a programming language, PHP is just a programming language. That's all it is. PHP is not to generate HTML. It could be used to generate HTML. Okay? And this is why you can use any programming languages to create web application, because after all, web application is just reading a bunch of response and putting that together for users to see. And what could you use to create that response? Any programming languages, right? All right. It will come to you if it didn't come to you today. All right. So at least, at least if someone explains to you when do you use PHP code for, and if someone says if it's used to create HTML, is that true or is that false? Okay. So I succeeded. That's basically the goal of why I did that. Okay. All right. So this is what we'll do. Maybe what I'll do is after the sports day, I think I'll talk about, let's talk about for loops a little bit. And let's talk about, if I said, okay guys, I want you to create this game. This one, something like this, but like a simplified version of this. So I want to, create this field. When I go to your website, I need to be able to see like something like this, okay? And I want to see a bunch of characters, okay, like this. Okay, but we're going to simplify it. We're going to just have 4 background images that you can use, and I'll show you. The background images are flowers, grass, and sand. So there are only 3 sprites that you can use. But I want you to create a map that allows you to display something like this. And there's one character, this red ninja character in Coding Dojo, red belt. Phyllis is a red belt, baby black belt now, because you took the qualifying exam. Okay? She might be the first black belt. Nick, other than me, of course. But it's not fair because okay. But that character, I want that character to be placed in maybe 5 different places randomly on the map. Okay, and if I said your group assignment is to create that, how would you create it? So think about that as you're playing kickball. Like, how do you do that? Right? Okay.
So we have to build that house?
Don't worry about the house. Yeah, don't worry about the house.
Good news.
So this is,
I already found it.
like, what got me to programming was I wanted to build games like this. So when I was 12, I played Final Fantasy 3, or I think I played it like maybe later. But anyway, I love creating games. And I had a friend who was creating games like this. So like I would copy his code. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But I would copy his code and I would look at it. And I had no idea. I didn't speak English at the time either. So I would just tweak things a little bit. And like I saw 4 loops, not number 4, F4R loop. Yeah, not number 4. Like I'm not even joking because I mean there were students who after 2 weeks said, Michael, I thought you were talking about 4 loops. I only have 2 for loops. Okay, 2 loops. But anyway, so yeah, that's kind of what got me excited. And I tweaked some code. I deleted like where it said like I equals 10. I changed it to 11, and then I'm like, oh, that's what that for loop is. And then I changed and I tweaked things a little bit, here and there. It took me a long time to learn. It took me a really long time to learn. But I ended up was able to create games like this. I initially created it using BASIC, and my character moved really slow. And because I was using, 286 computer, right? And then I'm like, this is too freaking slow. I need to do it in a faster language. So we did it in C. And then like my character was moving pretty fast. And then we did an assembly, parts of the code, and then like the character was flying. And then it's like from one end of the town to all, to the end, like in like half a second. So it was fun because again, when we talked about what does it mean to be a developer, we are creators. Okay, we solve problems and we create things out of thin air, right? With using logics. Logics, data, logics, we're just referring to if and else statements, for loops, and arrays. So again, think about how you would do that. Not something like this, but again, We have flowers, we got sands, and we got flowers. Yeah, flowers, grass, and sand. Okay? And let me make it a little bit harder. I want you, whenever I reload a page, I want this map to change. Okay? I want this, topography to change. And I want that 5 characters on different places. Whenever I reload, that's what needs to happen.
The sand and the grass and the flowers are kind of randomly floated upon.
Yeah, so, and I want the characters to be placed on top of the, so just randomly.
Right.
Yeah, so we have the ground, and then we have 5 characters.
Wait, so you're not talking about like moving the stuff, it's just like, just when you press.
We don't do moving
random,
yet,
it's just-
yeah, just whenever I just reload.
Just draw a random map with the ninja on it 5 times.
Yeah, on 5 different places, 5 different
Right, right.
ninjas. Yep, exactly. So think about it. Maybe I'll have you guys do it, and then maybe I'll show you how we can do it, how I would do it after you guys struggle with it. Because if I just show you now, then it won't be as meaningful. Right? Strength through struggle. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so I don't want to take more time because Alex has prepared some stuff to help you guys. So we'll turn the time over to Alex, and then sports day. After the sports day is done, I'll